Hello and welcome to Module 4. In this week's PowerPoint, we're going to focus on discussing the various change theories that you could use in your project. Each student will be tasked with choosing one change theory to apply to the processes and the planning within their individual quality improvement projects. The first change theory that I'll discuss is the 6 phases of planned change. This and many of the other ones are described in further detail in your leadership textbook if you still have that text. If not, you can always look up additional information on a theorist if it is beyond the 2 articles that are posted to Blackboard. The 6 phases of planned change involves the steps to work through planning for change that would be successful. And that's really the impetus behind all of these change theories. So the first step in this one is to build a relationship. So you really have to form some relationships to get the information that you need. Diagnosing the problem. And then of course, number 3 in this one looks at resources. So what are the relevant resources? And that may involve money, it may involve support from administration, and a variety of other things. Then it is choosing the solution, so what's going to work for that setting, gaining acceptance, so getting the team on board, and then stabilizing the innovation. So stabilizing is a really important thing in order for the change to become consistent and part of the new environment. The next change theory that we're going to talk about is the 7-stage models of planned change, and this is by Ronald Lippett. And again, this is one that is in that textbook if you have it. And this involves 7 phases. So developing need, so what is the need for change? Changing the relationship, clarifying, identifying alternative routes, so is there another solution that would be beneficial? Transformation, so implementing the change. Generalizing, and then terminal relationship. So terminal relationship in this one would occur once the change has just become part of the environment in which it was implemented. Kotter's 8-step model is a model that students have used fairly regularly in the past. This 8 steps seems to be a little bit easier for students to understand what components of a project fit into what area. So creating urgency is the first one. And so we need to identify what is the need to change this. Why do we need to do it now? The second step is forming a powerful coalition. So developing a core group of change advocates that will help with the change. Creating a vision for change. So what's that bigger vision, and what's the outcomes that are potentially going to be seen from this vision? And then how do you communicate that vision to those that need to see it? The 5th component of Kotter's 8-step model is to remove any obstacles. So what are barriers? And barriers might be culture of the setting. It could be related to finance. It could be related to administration. But how do you remove those obstacles, and what are you going to do to address those barriers? And that's really an important part of the project planning. Much of the information on barriers will likely come from the interviews that you do, is to plan for those barriers. Creating short-term wins is the 6th component. And that looks at, okay, we've implemented it, we've done it a couple of times. How did it go? Was it great? What can we do different? So celebrate each small increment as you go along. Building on that change, so then as you celebrate those short-term wins, you can move into the 7th component and create a culture where we are wanting to have continuous improvement. That's the norm. We're always looking to see how we can improve our processes. And then anchoring the changes. So once it's really becoming part of the culture, it's anchoring that and then honoring those that made it happen. This just gives you a visual depiction of Kotter's 8-step model. So basically what you would be doing when you implement a change theory is you might have a slide on your project that might look similar to this, and we'll talk about how you can design a slide and make it look like this. But this image shows each of the steps, and what you would then be identifying is you would need to talk to what did you do within each of these 8 steps. What part of your project was built into these components so that you're not leaving or forgetting anything in the planning. Bevan's change factors is another one that I've had students use fairly regularly in these projects. And this involves 7 components. So clarity is the first step. That's to clearly state the purpose of the change and the methods. Engagement, so we got to get people involved. Resources, so identifying the resources needed. Alignment, so who's going to be impacted by this? What subsystems? And getting them on board, all of the various departments or individuals that need to be on board. Leadership, so making sure that the leaders understand the need to change. So that's your administration and so on. Communication, so being responsive to any challenges or barriers will fall into there. And then tracking, so this is your outcomes. How are you going to monitor the progress and evaluate that it's happening? So this would be your process outcomes and your evaluation outcomes. The next is Lewin's force field analysis. Many students really like this theory, and on the left you see that it involves 3 steps. Unfreezing, so unfreezing means we have to unfreeze them from the behavior or the way that they've been doing something, so as a department. So you're going to unfreeze them to become motivated to change what needs to be changed, and then refreeze to make the change permanent. So within these various things, when you look at that changing what needs to be changed, there's a few things that are going on. So if you look to the right, you can see what's going on in order to make that change be accomplished. So we have at the top, you see the current state. So the current state is not where we want to be. We want to be where the desired state is. And so we have these driving forces, and that might be the literature and the evidence that support this change, and many other factors that could be the driving forces that support getting this change done. But you also have these restraining forces, and those are your barriers. And those are what are holding you back and keeping you in the current state instead of moving you forward to the desired state. So if you were to use this model in that changing, that second part, changing what needs to be changed, you would want to talk to what are the driving forces and what are the restraining forces for implementation of this change in the current setting. And again, this is one that students really commonly use. The last is Rogers' diffusion of innovations, and this talks about how people get on board with the change. And so what are you going to do in each component? And so if you were to use Rogers' diffusion of innovation, so in the first part you have the innovators. You're an innovator. You are recognizing that this is a change that should happen in that setting. And so you get a few other people on board with you and you start doing the planning. And then as you get a little bit further in the planning, you get some early adopters. So that's your team. Who's going to help to continue to motivate this change, balance out the barriers, identify what needs to happen to continue moving forward. And then you get to the early majority. So this is once, hey, we've implemented, everybody's on board, we've done most of the training, this is what's going on. Late majority and laggards are the end. So the laggards are the people who are very resistant to the change. They create a lot of barriers. And so as you speak to how you're going to continue to enforce this change and spread it throughout the department, you'll really need to talk about the barriers and the challenges when you're in that laggards, those people that are late to adopt the process. You'll be able to choose any of these theories to apply to your project. You will want to focus on one during this week's discussion board post, and you'll begin to develop how this theory is going to guide and what kind of things you will be applying within each step of the theory that you've chosen. So think about that, and I look forward to seeing you on the discussion board post this week. Thank you.